Hi, this is Jeff Curto, and welcome to episode number 175 of Camera Position, the podcast about the creative side of photography. So I'm always looking for new ways to see, new ways to think about seeing, new ways to train myself to be a better visual person, to be more astute and more aware visually. And so I sometimes fall back on an old adage that I remember hearing years and years ago from an older photographer who once told me inside of every 8 by 10 inch print, there's a really excellent 5 by 7 inch image desperate to be found. So, and I, he and I talked about that a bit, and what he meant was that every time we see a really good 8 by 10 inch image, it might be possible, it is likely possible that that cropping that produced that particular size or shape image could be used to produce a similar image, a better image that is smaller with even less information in it. That whole idea of trying to think about being the most efficient visual seer you can be. So that old saw, inside every 8 by 10 print, there's an excellent 5 by 7 image desperate to be found, is the foundation for an exercise that I've used for myself and in my classes over the years, and that is to take an image that you've made and search for alternate cropping choices that might strengthen the composition. Now, back in the day before the digital revolution, I would have students, and I do this myself as well, take 1 or 2 or 3 prints and take an X-Acto knife or a pair of scissors or something to them and see if they could find small compositions within that original image and see what they could see that they might not have seen when they raised the camera to their eye, composed the frame in the camera, and released the shutter. So now, of course, it's an awful lot easier, especially with applications like Lightroom, or for those of you who are still hanging on there, and God bless you, because I'm in your camp, those folks who are still hanging on to Aperture. I still open my Aperture catalog for my images and lament its loss. But here we are looking at Lightroom and the idea of virtual copies. Virtual copies, that idea within Lightroom where we can take the original file, whatever it is, whether it's a RAW file or a JPEG or a TIFF or whatever, and make a virtual copy and use Lightroom's tools to make adjustments to that virtual copy that don't alter the original image. So what I did in preparation for this particular podcast is I went through my Lightroom library and I found a photograph from about a year and a half or so ago, and I liked it okay, but it wasn't one that I was especially in love with, and it was originally shot in color, and I converted it to black and white, which I liked quite a bit better. And then I went through the process of doing this idea of looking for other compositions within the original composition. And I made a bunch of virtual copies, 1, 2, 3, 4, just 4 virtual copies. And for those of you who are not familiar with virtual copies in Lightroom, boy, are you going to love this if you're not familiar with them. And I've put a link on the web podcast page, cameraposition.com, and also in the PDF that goes along with the app to a great tutorial about virtual copies from our friend Julianne Cost, the indefatigable Julianne Cost, who always has the answers to all questions about Adobe products lurking there on her website. So there's a link right there to a great little video tutorial on using virtual copies. So I made a bunch of virtual copies, and then I went about trying to find compositions within my original image that I thought might be strong compositions. And what I find really wonderful about this particular exercise is not only is it a great way of teaching you a bit about how to see and about what kinds of things you might have overlooked when you originally made your photograph, but it also may end up making you a photograph that you like a bit better than the original one that you made in the first place. And regardless of whether you find a better photograph or not, I believe you'll learn a fair amount about how to see, about what it is that you're putting into the frame, the way you're editing yourself as you make photographs. And of course, in our digital era, we tend to make a lot more photographs than those of us who are still using film, or those of us who used film exclusively before the digital era. And yet, there is still that sense that, okay, I'm done with that subject. I'm finished exploring it. And perhaps I can't get as close as I want to, or perhaps I didn't really sort of spend as much time with that subject as I wanted to spend. So using this strategy, in a sense, post-visualization, sort of bastardizing that term a little bit, but visualizing the image after your exposure has been made, and going back in the comfort and privacy of your darkroom, if you're still working in the darkroom, or if you're using a computer and using something like Lightroom to adjust your images, make a bunch of copies and see what you can find buried inside of a photograph, or two or three. And I've given you some examples on the website and in the podcast app, on the PDF in the app and on the website. I've given you the original photograph and a marked up version of that original photograph with the 4 compositions that I found inside of it, and also the individual images enlarged a bit, so you can kind of see where I'm going with this idea, this exercise. The other thing that I think is might be an interesting thing to do is to share some things about this with each other. And so I'll put these images up on my Flickr account and put them in the camera position Flickr account, as well as having them on the blog page. And, I've gotten a couple of suggestions from users to tag images on camera position with a particular episode number so that people know what it is that people are looking for. So let's tag these with camera position 175. And that way we can find them in the Flickr feed for camera position if we tag them with just all one word, camera position 175. The idea of making several images from a single image. From one, let's make many and find out how we can learn a bit more about how we see, the way we interpret the world around us through the camera's frame, drawing that box around what it is that we find the most interesting. So go back in your archive, find a photograph or two, and chop them up and post them up on the Flickr site or on the Camera Position Facebook page, or if you put them on the Flickr site, link to it on the Facebook page. Let's use our social media capabilities and share some images with one another and see about how we can learn to see our images, our world, a bit better. One last bit here is I have a link on the cameraposition.com blog and also in the PDF for the app for you to be able to sign up for the advance notice mailing list for my Italy workshops. I'm already planning the 2017 workshops, and so if you're interested in attending one of those next year, let me know by signing up for the advance notice email list, and I'll put you on the list and you'll be able to get information about those workshops when that information becomes available. Thanks for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Camera Position, the podcast about the creative side of photography.